You know that feeling, right? You're staring at a survey and you just have no idea what they're actually asking. Well, have you ever thought about the art and science behind the questions themselves? It's not just about asking, it's about asking in a way that gets you the truth. And that, it turns out, is a surprisingly rare skill. I mean, we've all seen them. The survey that jams 10 questions into one, or the one that's so obviously pushing you to answer a certain way. It's this universal frustration. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and figure out not only why that happens, but how to do it right.
So before we can even think about building a great questionnaire, we have to understand the common ways they break. It's kind of like being a detective at a crime scene. You got to figure out what went wrong before you can solve the case.
Okay, here is one of the biggest and most common mistakes, and it's so simple to make. Look at this first question. Do you think Coca-Cola is a tasty and refreshing soft drink? This is what's called a double-barreled question. See the problem? What if I think it's tasty but not really refreshing? Or the other way around? I can't give an honest yes or no. The fix, as you can see, is just to split them up. One tiny change, but it makes a world of difference in getting good data. And believe me, this isn't just some academic thing. Getting questions right has massive, real-world consequences. Just look at the US Census. In 2000, they did a huge redesign of their questionnaire to make it clearer and way more user-friendly. And the result? The mail-in response rate jumped by 10% from 1990. When you're trying to count an entire country, that is a huge, huge victory. And it's all thanks to better question design. So how do we dodge all these mistakes? Well, a great questionnaire doesn't just appear, it's engineered. It all starts with a solid plan, a blueprint that guides every single decision you're about to make. So let's back up for a second. What are we really building here? At its heart, a questionnaire is basically a bridge. On one side, you have the information you desperately need to know, and on the other, you have the people who have that information. Your questionnaire is the structure that translates your goals into questions that people can actually understand and are willing to answer. And here it is. This is the roadmap for building that bridge. It's a really logical process. You start by figuring out exactly what you need to know. Then, you have to think about the person answering, how to design questions that overcome their natural hesitation or even inability to answer. Then, you get into the nitty-gritty of wording and ordering. And finally, the steps so many people skip. You test it. Let's walk through this. All right, now we get to the core of it all, the words themselves. Following our roadmap, this is where we start crafting the actual questions. And it's all about being precise, being clear, and being neutral. It's like being a wordsmith, but with a very specific mission. One of the absolute biggest data killers out there is the leading question. This thing isn't really a question at all. It's an opinion disguised as a question. It subtly or not so subtly pushes the respondent toward the answer you want to hear, which completely contaminates the results. Just look at this example. It's so clear. The incorrect one is loaded with emotional language, like patriotic Americans and put American labor out of work. It's basically screaming the answer at you. How could a patriotic person say yes? The correct version, on the other hand, is clean, it's neutral, and it simply asks for an opinion without judgment. The first one gets you bias, the second one gets you data. Simple as that. Now, being neutral is key, but clarity is just as important. This first question about shampoo seems fine, right? But it's actually a minefield of ambiguity. Use? What does that mean? The one I used this morning? The one I bought last year? The corrected version is just beautiful in its specificity. Personally used, at home, during the last month. Every single word is there to eliminate confusion and make sure we're all talking about the same thing. The takeaway here? Be ruthlessly specific. And here's another classic trap. Subjective words. Words like occasionally or often. My often might be your sometimes. They mean totally different things to different people. But numbers are universal. Using concrete numerical categories like 1 or 2 times, make sure that every single person is working from the exact same playbook. Okay, so we've worked hard to perfect our questions, but what about the person on the other end? Now we have to flip our perspective completely and think about the realities of the human brain. Its faulty memory, its sensitivities, its quirks. We have to design for the human. So here's a fascinating little quirk of our brains that can totally wreck your data. It's called telescoping. It's this natural tendency we have to compress time in our memories, making things feel way more recent than they actually were.
So if you ask me about something I bought 3 months ago, my brain might honestly remember it as happening just last month. So how do you fight back against a faulty memory and things like telescoping? Simple. You don't ask people to be human calculators. That first question, how many gallons, is nearly impossible for anyone to answer accurately. So instead, you ask about typical behavior. You ask about a pattern, not a specific, hard-to-reach memory. It's so much easier for people to answer, which means you'll get much more accurate data.
All right, but what about those really tricky, sensitive questions? Things like income or personal habits people might not want to talk about. Well, there are some really clever techniques you can use. You can stick those questions at the very end after you've built up some trust. You can also preface the question by saying that the behavior is really common, which normalizes it. You can even ask about what other people might do. And for things like income, offering ranges or brackets feels way less intrusive than asking for an exact number. Okay, you have written clear, unbiased questions. You've accounted for human psychology. You are so close. The last big step is to arrange everything in a logical order and, most importantly, give it a test drive. This is the final polish that separates the good from the great.
When you're putting your questions in order, one of the best techniques is called the funnel approach. You start wide, at the top of the funnel, with a really broad, open-ended question like this one. This lets the person answering think about the topic in their own words first, without any influence from you.
Then, once they've had a chance to think broadly, you start to narrow the focus. You follow up with more specific questions, like this one about location. And the order here is absolutely critical. Think about it. If you had asked about location first, you would have planted that idea in their head, and it would have biased their answer to the more general question. So remember, always general to specific.
And finally, we come to the most important, non-negotiable golden rule of all: pre-testing. You absolutely must test your questionnaire on a small group of people before you send it out into the world. This is your dress rehearsal. This is where you find out that a question is confusing, or a word doesn't make sense, or the flow just feels wrong. Skipping this step is like releasing a blockbuster movie without ever showing it to a test audience. It's just a recipe for disaster.
So the next time a survey lands in your inbox, you're not just going to be a respondent anymore. You're going to be a critic. You now have the tools to see the hidden architecture behind the questions. So the only real question left is, what flaws are you going to spot first?